Welcome to my Self Care Shit, the podcast, where we talk about what true self care looks and feels like. I'm your host, Kathy Love, 2-time TEDx speaker, author, and self care coach. Each week, we'll have honest conversations on how to create the peace and stability we crave in our lives. As the #1 international best-selling author of The Science of Empowerment, thought, energy, mindset, and transformational coach and speaker, and mind development and human awareness activator, Laura's skill set, gathered wisdom, and personal discipline to advance human potential is evident in her creative work. The care and consideration that supports her clients, attendees, and listeners around the globe is evident at first greeting. High energy output and the feeling that all things are possible begins the co-creative relationship that she is sought after and known for.
I just was talking about this, wrote another article for a magazine on this, and really looking at, my self-care and how important the work that you're doing, the podcast. Again, it's a vehicle, right, that we can get into for a moment and travel with other people and not feel so alone. And I've always been selfish in that way. My grandmother and my mother both taught me this. You come first, no matter what. Because if you are not connected to that knowing, you won't be any good for anyone else. And I've traveled with that knowing most of my life. I haven't always been able to be up front and center with it because life can knock us down, but it's always there. And I've tried to really instill this in my girls. You have to come first. And they've learned that with me. They know, like, if I'm not taking care of the way I eat, the supplements I take, meditation, stretching, whatever it may be, just to center and ground what I'm going through. If they come to me, I could be short-tempered or I don't have time. They know that. So they've seen that my mom takes time to do these things so that even if she's not at her best, she still has the ability to see that I'm really not at my best and that she can come through. So I think it's really important what you're doing because, right, a podcast, we know what's out there, and this is something I think very important.
That is quite the gift that your mother and your grandmother gave to you because so many people that I talked to didn't get that message. That is not the message that they got. And they lived their life in the opposite direction of taking care of everyone else and sacrificing and waiting until it was their turn and and really burning themselves out and causing physical distress and disease. And so I am so happy to hear that and knowing that you're passing that on to your daughters because it is something that we teach generationally. We teach our kids and they watch us. If we're not teaching it, if we're not saying it out loud, they're watching
They
and learning.
do. And I wasn't, and a caveat to that is the women in my life, the strongest, my grandmother and my mother, right? They were front and center. They were not without trauma and tragedy, and especially in those generations. And what my mother went through, she lost her mother when she was 10 years old. Uh,
Mm.
there were so many things. And even while I was going through my own challenges, there were times I forgot that messaging because you get soaked up into the human condition over a boyfriend or whatever it may be. But it was always seated in me to have this, confidence that I do matter. Even if at the moment I've lost connection to that, somewhere I was able to really get reconnected. And again, not in the moment every time. Still, I was just talking to my daughter Jade about this. She's 20, just turned 22. She's going through a lot, navigating a lot of ups and downs in life. And, she's always saying, like, Mama, how are you so strong? But I'll say, do you remember when? And she's like, oh, yeah. So they're used to me being on top of it, but I remind them, no, I'm vulnerable and I'm not weak, but I have vulnerabilities like everyone, but I have a skill set or I have a support system or I have a way of thinking that when something comes at me, I can recalibrate it pretty fast. And I really have gotten quite skilled at that now. That comes with age and experience and being kicked enough that you're like, no more. And so you get really, I think, very, again, very skilled at seeing things coming at you. And I'm also a big proponent of getting ahead of consequences. I write about this in The Science of Empowerment, and it's something that I've lived since my teenage years. Always seeing it around me and wondering, why is someone kind of going in that direction when they already know what's going to happen? Me, I like to be like, oh, I see it. Again, not all the time was I able to avoid it, but seeing it and then something my grandmother used to say, see it through. What's going to happen if you make this decision? And I think it's something, it was really great advice because I use it all the time. And I've really taught my girls, being around Christmas time, we were all together. My eldest came home from Tampa to, be with us for the holidays and talking about her direction and really moving through the process. If you take this turn, that turn, go down that avenue, that path. And I think a lot of us forget that that's part of taking care of the self, looking at what are we doing? What are the choices we're making? Where are they going to lead? So many of us are like, I don't care, I'll deal with it then. Where I think really to create an empowered life is to look at it. Where is it going to bring me? And is that really serving not only my highest and best self, but collectively?
I love that. And that is such an example. It's a grander example of that pause, the pause before we react, the pause before we say something, and learning over time how to stay in the present moment so that we can assess and make decisions. And that sounds like such a bigger example of actually taking the time to think it through, to work it through, to see it through, like you said, instead of just going along and taking whatever comes our way. I love that.
And so many of us do. This is what I really love about one of the aspects. And when I talk about writing the book, it's not about reiterating I wrote a book because like we author so much stuff in our life as it is. But my brother is a former USA Olympic gymnastics coach. He has been around little humans that have been geared and seeded and bred to become champions. And he created this incredible formula that really was the inspiration for me to sit and finally write. And one of the parts of in the formula is negative, positive, neutral. Which one are you? And it's this awareness to negative and positive energies. We all know what that feels like. We know what happiness feels like, and we know what sadness feels like. This is what I love about neutrality. It's the pause. It's this superpower of catching our breath, taking a physical step back, whatever it may be, to break the cycle, the patterning of reacting rather than the response. And when we are even in the midst of thinking fast and we don't know how to do that for ourselves, this is where we get in trouble. We don't take that moment of self-care to see it through, or at least think it out a little bit past, right? That trigger. And I think it's important. And this is what I really do believe neutrality has become my superpower. Everyone
Mm.
asks if you were a superhero and you could. I used to want to fly because I just can't. I think that would be so cool. Though I have a funny story about actually flying for a moment. Um, but it would be to be neutral, my set point, and I focus on this all the time. My set point is neutral. It's almost as if you're priming the pause to just be automatic, which we live in that opposition. So I think it's just an important way to look at life, to teach our youth. And for me, I can speak to the kind of authenticating it because it's how I live. Again, full transparency, not perfect at it, never will be.
Of course.
Learning the skill and really the nuance of it certainly helps me in times of challenge.
And this is exactly what this podcast is about is it's exposing people to different resources like your book, but it's also to remind people that we are just learning. We're constantly learning. And so if they're not living in a life of neutrality right now, that you mentioned the word skills. A skill is something that can be learned.
Mhm.
So I want people to hear that there are skills that they can learn at any time, at any point to get to this healthier, fuller life. And the awareness that you were talking about, I use that all the time of saying awareness, just noticing is such a big part of the healing.
Mhm.
But you can't be aware when you're in motion. It's harder to be aware. Let's just say it's harder to be aware. So I love that you use that word neutrality because in that space is when you can be aware, when you can notice what's happening around you because you're not wrapped up in it.
And I'm a car girl. I've grown up on boats and really very unique, vehicles, and so I think about kind of the example of a car. We all can relate. It doesn't matter what it is. You could have a little dune buggy, or it doesn't matter. We all know when we're in neutral, we're still. Well, I suppose if you're on a hill and you hit neutral, you could roll. That's, but we don't, but everyone would know. That's what I think about. We're in these energetic vehicles, right? The body is a vehicle. It's always moving and thinking and reacting. When we understand the power of pause or the superpower of neutrality, now our mind begins to think in a way that maybe it hasn't before, a new perspective. Wow, I can be neutral in this discussion. Oh, here's an argument presenting itself once again. We've been here for the last 10 years, with clientele. I see this all the time. I don't have to judge it, can observe it. I can take a moment, just neutralize it. And I think for the listening audience, neutral, you can create your own vernacular, right? We all have a unique lexicon here and the way that we speak to ourselves and to each other. But neutral is something we all understand. But even if there's a different word that resonates with someone hearing this, find your set point of neutrality. Let this become something of a new way of thinking and becoming. It really is a game changer. I have noticed, again, whether we're having a beautiful co-creative conversation, speaking at a TED Talk, whether we're working with clientele, it allows someone to think for a moment about stopping the momentum that isn't always and necessarily bringing them to a place of peace or calm.
And you talked about not judging. So in that space of neutrality, there's no judgment, good or bad. And I think that is was one of the greatest lessons I learned. I'll have to find the story about the farmer with the son and the horse. Do you know this?
Oh,
Right.
yes.
It's
Yes.
one of my favorites. I'll try to find it and put it in the show notes. But that actually reframed how I look at situations that I would before would immediately assign this is a terrible situation or this is the best thing that could have ever happened. And I've learned that there's a lot of projection either way that I've done in making that decision, and that staying neutral and without judgment can be the healthiest way to look at most situations.
Absolutely. And I know what you're talking about. And it also makes me think of the story of the two wolves and which one do you feed? Um, there's just so many like metaphors and analogies that we've collected in our human experience that everyone knows a little bit about what we're conveying here. That you are a human being that has this immense ability and potential to think differently than you always have in order to experience things differently. How you get there can be an absolute wonderful exploration. And as you just said, it doesn't have to be, oh my God, this is terrible and arduous and why me? It could be, this is cool. I get to discover something about myself that maybe I didn't have the confidence or I felt undervalued, but I'm not. I have permission to really know that I don't have to be reactive, that I have the power to pause. I have the ability to neutralize anything that's coming at me, towards me, so that I am better equipped to handle it. And I think, uh, not, I mean, in my experience, I've seen this out in the world more than I've seen, say, the power of neutrality being present. We are just we're not given the chance to really show up, I think, quite at our highest and best self um, on a daily basis. There's so much coming at us. There's tragedy, there's trauma, there's self-induced chaos and drama that we are attached to. If if people would start to really give themselves that permission to be curious about who they can become. I do think and feel that neutral will be more of a guide, a guiding force. It would be more of an inspirational kind of skill that they can acquire. And I love how you reiterated that skills can be learned anytime, anywhere, from anything. I mean, there's a vast library available at our fingertips now. Podcasts for me are just an amazing educational tool. There's always something that the listener will pick up. Just a second that becomes a lifelong shift that changes everything. So I really, again, I love looking at energy. I love knowing that and I appreciate that we have the ability to change the way we're seeing something at any given time. We may not be good at it or skilled at it, but when you continue to move in that direction, you will become a skilled human in neutrality. You will acquire that nuance of the power of pause. And you will think about stories and metaphors and analogies that help you in times of challenge.
So, in the episodes before you on this podcast, we have talked about emotions and relationships and a lot of inner dialogue. We have not used the word science, to my knowledge. So, can you tell us how the science plays into what you're teaching, what your book is about?
Yeah, thank you. And I love being able to answer this because it isn't science the way people would think. It's science. Science is alchemy. And for some, people will say, well, alchemy is magic. No, it is just formulas, geometry. It's putting things together in a way that creates movement. So the science of empowerment is, again, technique, skill, knowledge, emotion, consciousness, faith. It is whatever the reader or the client takes it on as. But there is a science to creating an empowered life. And that is unique to each individual. So, what I love about the book, there's nothing about me in the book. It doesn't tell you how to think and how to feel and which direction. What it does is open up the opportunity to expand on new perspectives, to gain insight and knowledge, all of your own making. It is this almost this manuscript that gives you insight to authorize, how do I want to think about an empowered life? How would I create a skill to be able to neutralize a challenging situation. And this is what I really love. So there's a science to it, and there's a formula to the science of empowerment, but it's really a way to interpret it on self. And this is what I love about what you talk about on the podcast. What if you read the science of empowerment, you would have a very different take on it than someone else would, because your mind would begin to align with your potential. You would hear the words, see the words, feel the language differently based on your life's experience. It also would ignite your potential because the way it's written, it actually creates neuronal pathways in the brain. It starts to bring newness to the forefront of, I never thought about that. I didn't think I could be that kind of human. What do you mean high level intellectual thinking or authorizing my autonomy, being independent of, and then fill that in? So there is a science with the formula, the J3 equals E. And I just was interviewed for this article about this. And I shared the principles. I had a very bad fall. I was practicing back flips. I fell on the top of my head. I was concussed for a very long time, about 437 days. I'm that type of kid that I've broken my legs skiing. I've jumped off roofs with my brother. We're just a little bit like that. And I've been hurt, sprained ankles, all kinds of things. I get up and I move. This knocked me completely back. Like, really, like, you want to talk about what felt like a decompression, like, kind of tank for me. And I had to find a way to move through this experience so that I didn't come out changed in a negative way. I used the formula. I used the science of creating an empowered experience from something that initially disempowered me. But I knew if I didn't catch it in time, I'd be afraid to do other things. And I was like, I don't want to be afraid. But, when you sublux your neck, your
Mhm.
C1, that's everything. I used to, we jumped on the trampoline and we did front handsprings and back flips. And we train in a gymnastics style environment. And, I didn't want to hear, well, aren't you a little old for that? It was like, no. So I moved through this equation that's set on five principles and the awareness to negative, positive, neutral energy. And every day I ask myself, what am I aware of around this experience? What am I willing to do to shift any negative emotion that's becoming attached to the fall, to the banging of the head, right? I had to get my neck cracked for 7 months every day when my neck was injured. I don't like the cracking. So there was so much that I had to go through on purpose in order to heal that was against a lot of my nature. So every day I would ask those questions. I'm running through the formula very quickly. Accountability. I was accountable for my healing. Only through self-love could I start to heal the way my mind was thinking, the way my body was reacting. Critical thinking. I really learned how to suspend the doubt. This has become a signature part of my coaching. Suspend the doubt. You don't ignore it. You don't push it under the rug. You just suspend it for a moment. This allowed me, again, before I really became skilled in the power of neutrality, I became skilled in suspending the doubt. What ifs? I started to remove them all. The minute the what came, I recalibrated that thought process. And then energy, negative, positive, neutral. Every day I'd ask myself, and I forced myself to feel the power of neutral, not the headache, not the throwing up. I needed glasses. I couldn't see. I was in the middle of writing the book. It actually changed the whole structure of the book. So
How long ago was this, Laura?
maybe 8 years ago,
Hmm.
but I can feel it like it was yesterday, just
Hmm.
because, right? The body, but then my mind has conditioned to realize That's a memory. It's not a reality. And so it helped me to help my clients know that it's okay to have connection to very real events, but we don't need to stay connected to the event. And so I ran through that formula every single day, which is what produced the science of empowerment. I personally had to not just heal, I had to empower myself through that experience. I never would have written the book, I never would have coached, nothing would have happened through that. I would have just given up because it really was something that, like I broke my leg skiing. I got up and I skied down the mountain out of shock, but I still did it because that's in my nature, like to power on. This, there was no movement. There was no movement. So, lesson learned in the stillness, the power of pause really taught me the skill of neutrality. So I feel like I can speak from a very authentic experience that I didn't
Hmm.
just write about the science of an empowered life. I created it, lived it, and now I can coach on it and speak on it.
And I love that it came from a physical. Obviously, I don't love that you went through that experience, except for the positive thing that came out of it. But to take a physical injury where most are looking at how am I going to rehab and make physical modifications, you were making mental modifications. And I'm sure it had to do with your identity and what you were able to do and what you had to put aside. Um, and so I love that your focus was on the mental rehab, which, so if I'm just thinking it could be a physical accident, it could be a divorce, it could be any type of experience that comes in and just shakes you up. And that this is, well, let's be honest, it doesn't have to be an event either. This could just be a way to reconnect to yourself and empower yourself.
And it's not just, we throw mindset around a lot, but it really was this. I looked at energy. My brother and I, even since we were kids, we really did believe we were superheroes because we grew up in that era. And we thought we had these cool energy gifts. Probably
Like
we did on some level, right?
the Wonder Twins when they used to
Yeah.
bump their fists
Yes.
together.
Yes. All of it. We still talk about it. I think that that was maybe what set that experience apart from other athletes and champions that I've been around, especially that my brother's been around. There's a mind shift that happens when you are conditioning the body for greatness. And you don't have to want to or desire or intend to become a gold medal champion. We all feel that way every day. We want to move with ease. We want to, have flexibility and mobility. None of us want to feel rigid in our thoughts, let alone, again, our faith or our consciousness or our compassion, not in our physical body. So when I was taken down a few levels physically, I knew I would either succumb to it or I would rise above it and get past it. Some of that's the way I was raised. Some of it's the way I've raised myself. It's the way I personally have dealt with life. But I was like, oh, no, you don't, period. And so I went into that mental care experience. How can I think differently in order to feel differently about what's going to happen? And at the time of the diagnosis, they were like, if you ever hit your head like this again, because I should have been paralyzed. That's how they framed it. It
Wow.
just was just enough that it, like if it had gone a splinter over, I was done. And so, I'm someone that I do, I do headstands and I work on the rings and I spin on bars and I just love movement. And I realized in that moment, and again, there's people that really have tragedy in accidents. My brother heals people that have been paralyzed from the neck down, and he does amazing things. I am nowhere near that. But in my world, for me, it hit me with that level of vulnerability. I was at the mercy of being helped to get up and, go brush my teeth for the first few weeks. Something I've never, even when I broke my leg or twisted, I just moved on it, hopped, crawled, it didn't matter. So I think all of us have this innate potential to tune in, tap in, connect, align with such healing ability, healing for us physically, emotionally, when we go through something, when we're dealing with a personal experience that brings sadness. Again, this isn't to dismiss the event or the experience. Never, you can't, right? The cells, the physiology knows its truth. It's to acknowledge that something took place, and now I'm going to use my thought energy, which is something I specialize in, but the way we think, to have positive directive over the emotion, over the physical challenge, over the financial hardship. And again, no one's waving a magic wand and poof, I read a book and I'm cured. I learn the formula and everything is, perfected. No, that's not what we're here for. But acquiring and gaining insight and knowledge and learning new skills and tools that help us move through challenges differently, that's again what creates an empowered human, an empowered life, and in my ideal of life, an empowered society. When we exercise self-love, however that may be, through challenges or just through life every day, we become a version of ourself less settled for. And I believe we can show up more equipped to help another person or other people.
It's beautiful. I was just about to ask you what it would look like if we were all empowered, and that's such a
Mhm.
great description. And you have been through so much, you've learned so much, you have taught so much, and yet your book is it's for someone to figure. You're not instructing everybody you're not telling everybody what to do. You're not saying this is what worked for me. Now you do it.
Mhm.
You are guiding them through a process that they can make their own. And that's another thing that we talk about all the time is find your own whatever works for you. And so I love that someone can take your book and work through it at whatever point they're at.
Mhm.
It's almost, it's almost, your book is an embodiment of the neutrality.
It is. Thank you. And I knew, I mean, you're so perceptive and have such a brilliance of your own unique making that I knew you would, understand that. And that's what I try to again, really express. It is not someone telling you, who to become and how to become that person. It's just this very unique journey of language and energy to spark and ignite what's already there. And I get so passionate about the book because the information for me was a gift from, and everyone has a different universe, God, however you want to look at it, but it was something that was inside that came out. And every one of us has that greatness and that beauty and that brilliance and that power in you. I write about this in the science of empowerment, and I'm a firm believer, and I wish I was a scientist by trade. I believe coded in the DNA is quantum levels of all that is possible. I truly do. And science is now starting to validate that. It's not something I came up with. It's something we all have experienced in our life. We all have seen miracles, whether it's a birth of a child, falling in love, right? Having a TEDx talk. There's moments where we're like, whoa, that's the magic, that's the alchemy, that's the science of the universe reflecting itself back onto us. And I want every human being to feel that, to know that I matter, how I think and feel matters, that I have value to contribute. And it doesn't matter what we're doing, gardener, teachers, housekeepers, writers, podcasters, scientists, presidents, teachers, religious leaders. We all have ups and downs and good and bad examples of all of it. But I think to live a life settled for, that's what makes me sad. And that was a driver to write the book. So that when someone, the first sentence, regardless of your present condition, boom,
Mhm.
it starts right there. It's letting you know it doesn't matter. There's something in you that's being called out. And it could be, I've worked with a lot of youth in environments that are less than positive, but we always find something. It could just be a bed, it could be a towel, it could be a toothbrush, it could be something when they open the fridge, and it may not be all this abundance, but it's something to let them know that they have the power to manifest that they are not without nothing. There's something in them, and now let's really move on that. So I I I really wrote it, every word, every sentence, so that the reader felt I'm here. I'm in this. It's not about someone else. I didn't read anything from anyone else and then try to siphon it through. This was how can I contribute knowledge so that when someone was reading this particular book, they felt empowered. And I've yet to meet anyone that hasn't when they've gone through the book. Oh, I mean, I that's what started the coaching business, to be honest with you. Someone started reading it and then they reached out and emailed because you can. And they were like, "Can you coach me on this chapter? What does this mean?" And it just started organically. But everyone is just, I think, amazing and beautiful and special and has value to contribute. And I want everyone to, when they're old and gray, really old and really gray, meaning just have lived that life, right? The wrinkles and all of it, they feel like, whoa, that was good. That was good.
I know you believe that. I
Yeah.
know for sure you believe that. For the people who are listening who don't quite believe that, do you believe it's possible for everyone to get to a point where they know how much they matter, where they believe how
Mm.
much just by being that they are love and they are loved?
Well, you and I quietly and privately know we have personal connections to maybe a less than neutral response to that question. Okay. Yes, I do. However, our judgment on what that may mean, could mean, or should mean may be different than what it did mean to someone else.
Hmm.
So we may see potential and it's ever expanding. And there is no end to it. Even when our physicality is ready to quiet itself down and transition to whatever may be after the physical human experience, someone else, it may feel like it was cut short. I question this all the time. So many of us contribute to St. Jude and to the Children's Hospital that I know of, or any charity or anything that matters to our hearts. You wonder, how can that be? How can little souls come in and go through this experience and leave us so soon without maybe knowing their full potential? When I've met people in those environments, they're so much grander than I am. There's something that they've tapped into and know differently. Maybe they can't express it completely, um, but there's something that they're connected to, I think, beyond our understanding, that they're almost ahead of us in that way. And I'm not sure if that came out as eloquent as I'm trying to convey it, but yes, I think everyone is reachable. To
Yeah.
what level and depth are they reachable, and how that may have effect on their destiny, that's out of our control. But
Right.
everyone that's listening, you are loved, you matter, you have purpose. And if you are in question of that, please don't hesitate to reach out, because
Right.
I'll remind you.
Yeah. And there are resources and resources and resources like this book.
Yeah. And the
So thank you.
podcast. Yeah, you're
Hmm.
welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. So Laura, I think we were scheduled to have this conversation 6 months ago or
I
even
know.
longer. And I'm glad that it happened today. As always, it's always at the right time. You just have so much to offer to this community, and I'm just so thankful. I'm thankful that we met through the Outlier Project, and that you know, have stuck around, and we were able to get you on here today. So thank you so much for your time and your energy and your wisdom.
Yeah, thank you. And a shout out, yeah, to Scott and everyone, the work and the empowerment that they contribute to the world. And I want to, on a personal note, get so much more involved, because this is exactly what we need to connect and community. And even if it's quietly off to the side, there's always someone that you can reach out to in that particular community as well. But you and I have talked about, even when we first met, like, we need to get together and have a cup of tea and just sit and talk. And friendships take time and develop. But you just interviewed someone recently, and we're talking about that, how he was kind of on the outside and then started getting more involved. Your friend that sat in on your talk, and it made me think about that there was something in my gut where I didn't want to disconnect from this community.
Hmm.
It's just too important. And I'm really excited for the gems of wisdom that I am going to learn in this next year from the people that I admire and look up to, and that have really been through a lot of hardship and challenge and have recalibrated all of it into something magnificent. And so, again, for anyone doubting, there is knowledge and information and resources um, out there. Don't give up. Don't give in. Actually expand out and reach out to any of us in any way. If you're feeling a little bit less than, because we will remind you of just how beautiful and perfect that you are. And I really think, again, I just want everyone to know that you are equipped with what is needed to create an empowered
Yes.
life.
Already. Hmm. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great job making time for yourself today. Be sure to subscribe to my Self Care Shit, the podcast, wherever you listen in. Your 5-star review will help get this show to whoever needs to hear it. Go grab your free daily self-care checklist on myselfcareshit.com. Please take the last minute of this podcast for yourself to listen to the ocean waves and breathe.